I'm Alex Roarty, political correspondent for McClatchy, coming to you from my coronavirus bunker in the nation's capital. Today, I am thrilled to be rejoined by Francesca Chambers, a McClatchy White House correspondent who, I think it can be said, we shared a bonding experience with this week, trying to finish and publish a complicated story. Francesca, welcome.
And you could even tell, for those who are watching this, like, we're even dressing the same now. We're in matching outfits.
we're in simpatico. What can I say? Of course, we are pleased to welcome back to the program David Catanese, my fellow political correspondent at McClatchy, and someone who I can only presume has many, many thoughts to share about the Kanye West alleged run for the presidency. Dave, welcome.
Oh, man, there have been so many deleted tweets that I've had set up this week that I'm like, probably not a good idea. So save them for the pod.
I was going to say, just bring up the archive, your Twitter archive, and just read off all of those deleted tweets if you could for us. Coming up, we're going to examine Donald Trump's recent fixation on defending Confederate statues, which has confused even many GOP strategists as the president tries to regain the ground he's lost with voters over the last 6 weeks. But first, the battle for control of the Senate is getting more and more attention of late, as Trump's slipping poll numbers would seem to put the GOP's majority in grave danger. But maybe surprisingly, there's a group of Republicans who wouldn't be so sad if it went down in flames. A loose confederation of #NeverTrump Republicans has begun working against some GOP incumbents, arguing, in a story Dave and I wrote recently, that to reboot the party, even Republican legislators need to lose re-election. Now, importantly, not all Never Trump Republicans feel this way, to say nothing of the broader party. But Dave, these actions at the Lincoln Project and elsewhere have ignited a real argument. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so obviously these groups were formed to defeat Trump. And we should be clear, some of these Republican operatives are sort of been exiled from the party very early on. I mean, starting in 2016, they started to leave when Trump was the nominee last time before he became president. But what we noticed in this, in the last couple of weeks is they've been really escalating their attacks on Republican senators who have varying degrees of loyalty to Trump, right? They're targeting Joni Ernst in Iowa. They're targeting Steve Daines in Montana. Most Americans probably don't even know who Steve Daines is.
Most Montanans might not know who Steve Daines is.
Right. But because he votes with Trump and didn't stand up against him in, say, the Senate impeachment trial, they believe he is culpable and they believe that he needs to be defeated. So in essence, these Republican groups have almost become Democratic groups. When you look at it practically, they are not only trying to take down Trump, they're trying to take down the GOP Senate. And to some Republicans, this is like a step too far. Even some Republicans who are not Trump fans, David Catanese, I think is sort of the prototype of that. Joni Ernst consultant who was Iowa-based. He now lives in Colorado, but a Republican that is not a Trump fan, is a Trump skeptic. He told me he wouldn't tell me whether he would even vote for Trump. But he said, look, going after Joni is too far. She's a Republican. She's conservative. She has conservative values. She fights for conservative principles, and she'll vote for a Republican majority leader, Mitch McConnell, which in the end, that's the big vote, right? Who gets to lead the Senate? So there's a bit of a debate right now. As we reported, these groups are beginning to spend some money, but it's not a ton of money. So I think we have to watch that. A lot of this is, them sort of putting out web videos, which are fundraising tools for them to raise more money that goes back into a lot of their pockets. So
a lot of Republicans are very eager to make to reporters. I would add, yes.
Right. And, I pulled the ad data. They have only spent a couple $100,000 in a couple of these states. They spent against McConnell, obviously, in Kentucky. They spent against Ernst. They spent against McSally in Arizona. But the numbers are very, very small. So it's like David Catanese said, like they're not really invested in these races, but they want us to seem like they are. But they say, look, they're going to escalate this as this goes through the summer into November, which we will have to watch how far they go to try to take down the Senate. But in actuality, I mean, if the state of the election stays where it is right now, the biggest battle may be for the Senate. The presidency may be decided more in an emphatic way, and the Senate may be a closer call.
And there's been some discouraging news, I think, for Senate Republicans, even independent of Trump, in the last week or so. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but just real quick, let's stick with this, Dave. I mean, what the Lincoln Project and the other groups, we should say it's not just the Lincoln Project, this group, Republicans Against Trump, which is also spending money, has a budget of $10 million for this election cycle, has also indicated some willingness to criticize GOP senators. It seems like the argument that they're making, they're already thinking ahead, right, to a post-Trump war for the GOP. Yeah. That's what they hope is going to happen. And like we just said, that is a real possibility the way things stand now. And they're trying to show that anyone who doesn't actively oppose Trumpism and the president deserves to lose re-election, doesn't deserve to hold office. I mean, are we seeing in some ways like the first forays into what a post-Trump GOP looks like, some of the first arguments?
Even if Donald Trump loses the presidential election, Trumpism doesn't go away. He is still going to be around. He will be on Twitter. He will be probably granting interviews to OAN or Fox or Newsmax. His sons are still going to be around. Ivanka is going to be around. The Trump apparatus will still be there. And many of these senators, Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, even Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, who have mainly been loyal to Trump, probably want to run for president again. So there will be a race within the party about how do you succeed Donald Trump? How do you become the next standard bearer for the Republican Party without alienating the 38 to 40% base that is going to be loyal to him no matter what, but also broadening that to a winning coalition? And these sort of never Trump Republicans say this is why you have to get rid of the whole party. Even Susan Collins, the most moderate Republican, that she is always concerned and hasn't done enough to stand up and really go against him. She needs to go down. The only one they exempt, I will say, is Mitt Romney. They say he's the one that gets the exemption from these never Trump Republicans. But they feel like the whole lot, which means basically the entire Senate and the House, with the exception of Mitt Romney, needs to go. Now, that's not going to happen. But if they were to take down a couple of them, if they were to take, Joni Ernst loses and Steve Daines loses, what they think could happen is that then scares other Republicans and makes them draw back and say, we have to reevaluate. We cannot. Now we need to cut ties with Trump and Trumpism.
Francesca, the seemingly the obvious drawback to a plan like that, and Dave and I picked this up in our reporting. Some Republicans, former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, who is a never Trumper, who is very publicly critical of the president, has been really since day one, argued that she thinks someone like the Lincoln Project needs to be more thoughtful. She's not opposed in general to the idea and concept, I should say, to the idea of running ads against some of these GOP enablers of the president, the way she sees it. But her point, and I think, Francesca, this is a good one, if you help Cory Gardner lose re-election, well, no one sees Cory Gardner as really the epitome of Donald Trump, right? No one sees, as Dave just mentioned, Susan Collins as the epitome of Donald Trump. If they lose, what you're going to be left with is Tom Cotton, right? And the center of gravity in that case, they would argue, then moves toward Donald Trump. Even if he leaves, that you have more Trumpy-like GOP senators are the only ones left because the battleground senators are less Trumpy. I mean, that seems like that argument has some merit, Francesca.
But there's also the senator's 6-year terms, and Donald Trump, if he were reelected, would only be there for 4 years, or a Democrat, for 4 years either way. So you're really talking about electing people to 6-year positions when we don't know what the next 2 years, 4 years is gonna be. There could be so many variables in there of who ends up president and therefore which party ends up having control. If Democrats win the White House and then they also had the House and the Senate, most of the people that we're talking about here are Republicans or even very conservative Republicans, and you're giving Democrats a carte blanche opportunity then to pass very progressive policies, which is not the same necessarily as just getting Donald Trump out of office, but Republicans retaining control of the Senate, which is essentially where they serve as a check on a Democratic-run House and a Democratic-run White House. As far as Susan Collins is concerned, I really want to touch on that because I spoke to her last week, and we spoke about the president's white power tweet that he then deleted and said that he didn't hear what was being said in the first few seconds of that video. And she said that it was absolutely a mistake, that he absolutely should have deleted it. When I pushed her a little bit, though, to be more critical, as is discussed in your article, she tried to say that she had been critical, that she had spoken out against President Trump on every single time that he has done something that's been controversial when it pertains to race. And I asked if it was an effective, his message that he's pushing right now, and I know we'll get into this later, but this is relevant to Susan Collins, if she thought that this was an effective strategy, the language that he is using right now. She was like, I'm not really involved in his reelection at all. I'm really focused on my own reelection. So she is cautiously distancing herself from the president. That's true. But as you guys pointed out, she did not like lay into the guy when we were speaking. She really could have. I gave her every opportunity and she chose not to do that. And I think that's really what the epitome of her struggle is currently in her race, is that she wants to, she needs to distance herself from Donald Trump just enough. But she doesn't, I think, want to distance herself so much that then you also have the president coming at her, attacking her as well. And she's already in a pretty tight race against Sarah Gideon, the Democrat, who is raising significant amounts of money. And this is going to be a very telling race, that what happens with the Senate.
Yeah, I mean, finding that sweet spot between distancing yourself from the president, but as you say, not doing it so much that it catches the president's notice and then he starts tweeting about you. And then the Republican voters that you need to count on for your base suddenly turn up their nose at you and decide that they're not going to support you. I mean, it is so small that it might be non-existent, really. I mean, because you have seen, and it is true, certainly of Democrats and for a lot of people who don't like Trump, and for a group like the Lincoln Project, where the sort of like the wag of the finger is not nearly enough. And it's almost like waving, the proverbial red cape at the bull, because they see that as triangulation for your own political purpose, but not actually doing anything substantive to push back against the president. It's a tricky place for all these Republican incumbents to be, and as you know, like if we remember even the last presidential race in 2016, I think it's been burned into the minds of all these Republican strategists. And it's going to be severely tested, I think, in 2020. The Republican incumbents, or I should say the Republican candidates who spoke out most forcefully against Trump in 2016, Joe Heck in Nevada, Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, they both lost. They both lost. They both lost in part because some of those Trump voters said, well, screw you. If you're not for the president, I'm not going to vote for you. And they lost very tight re-elections. I mean, it's a difficult political position for these incumbents to be in, Francesca.
Well, and I also want to add on to what Dave was saying about the future of the Republican Party. It's not just these groups that you profiled that are worried about the future of the party. There are conservatives who, even if you do agree with Trump and you support Trump, recognize that after Donald Trump, that there's going to be something next. And they recognize that there are these forces, right, who don't like Donald Trump, who are already gearing up aggressively. And so they're starting to do the same thing. Freedom Works, for instance, is, really trying to position itself to be able to take advantage of whatever the next, wave of the Republican Party is. And Dave mentioned the president's sons. It's my understanding that Donald Trump Jr. plans to stick around, plans to stay in politics. And you can see that based on all of the political activity that he's had. He's not building up something just to be done when his father leaves office, whether that's soon or it's in 4 more years from now. So he is definitely someone that you'll have to continue to contend with if you're a Republican in the party.
Dave, let's talk for a second about the Lincoln Project, because it is, I can't remember a group quite like it. Like you said, it is a lot of almost ex-Republicans at this point, Steve Schmidt, Rick Wilson, a handful of others who have been so publicly critical of the president. And their strategy seems to be, as best as I can tell, trying to troll Trump and his fans online. The question is, are they really moving any voters? Which is, after all, what the actual point should be, you would think.
I don't think there's evidence that they're moving voters yet. That's why I think the Senate races will really be sort of the test for them, because some of these Senate races will be a few points. And are they investing in October in a really substantial way to push Teresa Greenfield in Iowa over the finish line against Joni Ernst. I think they are largely a DC, Twitter happy insider, sort of a cheerleading squad. You've got a lot of Democrats who love them. So now they're like BFFs with a lot of the Democratic operatives out there, which raises questions about, where their career path is next. But that's sort of a very insider question. The critique, and I had a Trump ally texting me this morning, trying to, get me to write a sort of a hit piece on the Lincoln Project, being like, look at their donors. They're all Democratic donors. These are not Republicans. These guys are just trying to make themselves rich so they can buy another boat for the summer and, get one last contract in before they're completely exiled for the party, because his point was, who's going to hire these guys even in a post-Trump era? You're going to hire the Republicans who tried to take down not only Trump but Republicans in the Senate, so they have no power in Washington. So look, there's a lot of animus against the Lincoln Project and Republican voters against Trump. Someone was sending me information to ask them if they have more than one Republican donor. So look, it's going to be interesting to see exactly where the investment is, because let's be clear, the Republican voters against Trump group is actually spending. They spend a bunch of money on advertisements with testimonials. The Lincoln Project is a little more of a frat house vibe, where they are poking Trump in the eye every day online, putting an ad on Fox in DC to run, 3 times during Tucker Carlson, so Trump will see it and then tweet about it. So then they will raise more money. And it's this circle. Does that have a big impact on the election? No, but it's fun for us in DC.